Mr. Speaker, we have 3 points of substantive. We'll throw in some more if we have time. First, so much rebuttal. So what we hear from the preceding speaker is this. First of all, she chooses to straw man Suhail's speech and say that Suhail was pursuing an explicitly anti-urban agenda. We never actually said that. We think that in some circumstances, for some communities and some economies, cities are actually kind of the best place to live. The problem that we have, Mr. Speaker, is if you compel people to migrate to cities, you start to see lots and lots of social problems emerging, especially linked to things like economic conditions and getting jobs that are right for your particular skill set and background, right? She then goes on to teach all credibility from her speech by saying the basic line they're pursuing is to say we want everybody to live in a Singaporean city-state. Well, why don't let's just kind of cut straight to the logical conclusion of that and create Megacity 1 and have everybody have it controlled by Judge Trewick, right? That, I think, would be wonderful. Shangri-La is not sufficient provable good to say that everybody should live in a Singaporean style estate, right? He's nice, but he's not. Sorry. Right. Okay. No, thank you. Right. Additional rebuttal is going to be introduced. So let's get back to kind of what this motion is actually about, right? Which is investing in economically marginalised regions. Under the status quo, there is a policy where you engage in regional regeneration, right? You do things like create local area tax breaks, and you have reskilling, right? Training which is focused on allowing people to develop skills they have that are no longer economically productive, in order to turn those areas once again into nice places to live, right? Now, this policy isn't sufficiently pursued by governments at the moment, but with things like an increased emphasis on increasing economic competition and economic diversity and industrial diversity within particular countries, right? No longer having countries rely on particular economies. That policy is now gaining popularity. We think it's a much better policy to pursue than their policy of just moving everybody down to London and the South East, giving them some training and hoping they'll be economically competitive. Why is this the case? One, because you see, there are geographical factors that mean, cities like Durham, Newcastle, and Sunderland are particularly good for particular types of industry. Newcastle and Sunderland are sitting on the sides of fucking great rivers. This means therefore it's quite useful to engage in any sort of industrial work there because of the ease of transport infrastructure, especially maritime work. It may no longer be a market for really big boats, right? But the problem we have, thank you, is that there are other things we can make that float on the sea. There are other things we can make, right, that rely on the sort of engineering infrastructure and the sort of entrenched engineering knowledge that exists in places like Newcastle. Similar case applies to Scotland, which is currently going through its own mini Mittelstand engineering group. Because Scotland is an industrial city, right, that has entrenched infrastructure, entrenched expertise when it comes to facilitating those particular types of skill development. Now, low-level employees may get a shitty deal out of this. Low and medium skilled unemployment may not be a thing in those areas, but this simply means we need to focus training on taking those existing skills and improving them, and making them more fitting for the current economic climate. So thank you. What's the alternative here? Second point of substantive, right? Let's just reconstruct what Suhail said, not that we need to, right? So the situation we have is that we are, under their model of the world, moving people en masse down to places like, Birmingham, down to London, down to the southeast of England. Why is this problematic? One, because investment in an area, right, that really big, important chunk of the motion, doesn't necessarily mean there are lots of jobs. Investment in an area can be attracted by businesses that use relatively low levels of employees, right? Like Google and the data centers and Apple. Those use a small number of highly skilled employees and they attract a correspondingly large amount of money. This means that there are jobs that are going to be available. This means that the individuals who are moving down there don't necessarily have a skill set that makes them appropriate for those jobs. I can't take a Sunderland welder, Mr. Speaker, and turn him into an Apple genius, right? I can't take a Sunderland welder and train him to work in Google, right? Unless I invest massively in that individual, unless I'm prepared to pay him to do a full 3-year university degree. I'd like to see them justify that cost. I know cost arguments aren't fashionable in debating at the moment, but the point where you're saying, let's take every single person going down to the central Sunderland DSS office and giving them a degree in computer science, I think that's slightly ridiculous, because that's what they're going to need to be competitive in those areas. What other types of jobs take you 5 minutes are going to be relevant in those areas? Mainly service economy jobs that are linked to those areas, right? What you're doing if you move individuals down there is putting them in competition with every other low and medium skilled kind of level worker for those jobs, which means they're less likely to get them, which means they're more likely to spend more time on benefits, even if you give them training. What other harms do we see here? Because the prop they're giving us is essentially compelled migration to city areas. What happens when people migrate to city areas? You get the banlieue in Paris, Mr. Speaker, where we've had large numbers of Algerian, Moroccan and Turkish immigrants moving into some of the cheapest to live areas in London because they can't afford to live anywhere else. jobs in those areas are relatively slim. And you kind of see lots of other negative effects resulting from this, such as individuals and families who do get jobs not having the time to develop their skills or invest their money because they have much larger families behind them who they need to support with that money. You see lots of small social problems that are associated with high unemployment in barrier areas, in like neglected inner city areas, because people have problems with the police, because they don't have meaningful sources of employment to occupy them. And most importantly, Mr. Speaker, you see like more costs being put on the state to deal with these social problems.
Right, considering that was a really gross and slightly offensive mischaracterization of all poor people, can you explain to us how, like, why necessarily, when people move to these cities, they also get better access?
Third point of substantive, right? Let's talk about gross and offensive mischaracterizations of poor people. Because they've done what Doxford love to do, right? They've said poor people aren't equipped to make rational decisions about where they live, right? Third point of substantive, why should we support poor people, like people who can't get jobs, who want to stay in the north of England? Here's the thing, Madam Speaker. Last time I checked, we were living in a democratic state that had freedom of movement and a right to family life, right? Oh, talking about rights, still not very fashionable. Here's why those things are meaningful. Because my conception of the good life and my ability to have a valuable life isn't just linked to my ability to work for Apple or have a good job. It's linked to my ability to be part of a wider community and family connections that exist within those areas. It's not just the case that you have entrenched negative trends in those areas, right? People have large and loving families, not just in the south, but also in the north. They might want to stay there, right? They might want to try and develop those areas because there is something more meaningful in those areas than simply having a high-paying job. We think that the state has a duty to enable that because the state doesn't simply exist to maximise economic efficiency. They're the ones being grossly offensive about what the state should do and what efficiency actually represents. So what have we told you? Like, firstly, we've shown that they grossly mischaracterised Suhail's point. We're not just about increasing employability within cities, towns. We're about increasing employability in economically neglected regions. We've examined the harms that can result from forced migration to urban areas, right? You see this, for instance, in German slums, in Posen, in banlieue, and in any number of German suburban neighbourhoods. Finally, we've given you analysis to indicate that the state shouldn't just maximise the economic efficiency of individuals, but also enable them to be free to live practical, loving and fulfilling family lives, which are rooted inherently in their communities. Very proud to oppose.